I'm delighted that the Baptist Home has asked me to speak about my parents' relationship to Tom and Flora Nelson and Nelson and Wilma Duke, and in particular to speak about these four individuals and how they were special servants in the kingdom of God. My mom and dad had a very close personal relationship with Tom and Flora. They were very close personal friends. My mom and Flora spoke on the phone with great regularity. As a matter of fact, it probably wouldn't be a stretch to say almost daily they were on the phone with each other. They were next door neighbors when my parents and Tom and Flora lived in Valley View. They were right next door to each other. I remember in particular July the 4th, 1976 as a weekend that my dad had bought a new fishing boat. He and I took it down the Gasconade River and christened it with a day of fishing. We came home and we caught quite a few fish and quite a few large fish, and we pulled in the driveway, and as I got out of the car, Dad said, go get Tom and tell him to bring his camera. And so Tom did, and I can still remember as we were holding him up on a fish line, he said, here, let me get down on one knee, and he was almost on his stomach pointing the camera up, and he made those fish look like they were 5 feet long. Tom and Flora were also very important to my family in times of crises. In 1960, my Uncle Robert was killed in a car wreck in Kennett, Missouri. And Tom Nelson went with my dad, Carl, to my grandparents in Barnett, Missouri. And Tom helped my dad break the news to Grandma and Grandma about the death of Dad's older brother, Robert. So my relationship with Tom and Flora, I think, mirrored Mom and Dad's relationship. It was a very close personal relationship, one in which they ministered to our family, but one in which their personal friendship was always very special as well. Nelson and Wilma Duke came to Jefferson City in 1963, and I literally grew up under Nelson's ministry. 4 months later, the church had its first revival under Nelson's ministry, and he was the evangelist, the pastor. He preached the first revival. It was during that revival service that I made my profession of faith. And I still remember Nelson Duke coming to our house on Edgewood Drive and leading me through the plan of salvation. He did that in a way that I have shared with children for years and years and years. When I think of Nelson and Tom, I also think of their mentorship to me. I learned so much from each of them. Tom was such a great preacher. And I remember when I came to First Baptist Church in California in 1997, I went out to eat lunch with him, and I said, Tom, this is my first senior pastor, give me a word of counsel. And he said, I'll have 2 words for you. First of all, he said, preach with a manuscript in the early days. It'll be good discipline for you in your study. And second, he said, preach the great text. There's a reason why they're great text. He said, stay focused on them. And I've never forgot those 2 words of counsel. I learned so much about administration from serving on staff with Nelson. He was such a great administrator. Both these men had great pastors' hearts, and they're known for that. In many ways, I would say that serving on staff with Nelson Duke, growing up under his ministry, having Tom Nelson as a part of my life, I think was the equivalent of a seminary education. I learned so much from each of those men, and from their wives as well. Flora was such a great pastor's wife, and so was Wilma Duke. Both of these women were just role models for any pastor's wives, and I know that Isla looked to them as good examples when we stepped into the senior pastorate at First Baptist Church in California. And so again, Tom and Nelson, great men, but Flora and Wilma, wonderful women, and they were just what we might call power couples in many ways, because their influence in ministry has continued to be felt around the world even up until these days. Both of these men and both of these ladies were full of integrity, with an absolute strong sense of God's call on their life. And it's a great privilege for me to be a part of their lives, and certainly to have their lives be a part of mine. I know the Baptist Home plans to name the chapel the Duke Nelson Chapel in honor of Wilma Duke and in memory of Nelson Duke and Tom and Flora Nelson. I know that. And I will tell you, they could not choose better examples to name a chapel after than these 4 individuals. You know, when I think of But why that blends well, I remember some of my earliest memories after Nelson Duke came to be our pastor following Tom Nelson, was how confused I could tell when I was 10 years old that some people would talk about Brother Nelson and not know who they were talking about. Was it Brother Tom Nelson or was it Brother Nelson Duke? And maybe in that way, the Nelson Duke Chapel blends in a great way the formation of these lives. So I think it's highly appropriate. And I think the Baptist Home could not pick 4 individuals whom it would be better to honor, in large part because I believe these 4 individuals, humble as they were, would prefer for that not to be. But if we were to ask them, would you allow us to borrow the good nature of your name to help people in a ministry setting, they would say yes, because quite frankly, I didn't know any of them to ever say no when people needed help. So these are some of my thoughts, some of my memories. First Baptist Church is full of wonderful memories for me and for my family. And so I just want to say to you today how grateful I am that the Baptist Home has asked me to kind of share some memories. I hope these are a blessing to you. They are to me. And I just hope you guys have a great day at First Baptist Church. Thanks a lot.